Hello and good day everyone. For this lesson we will look at some certain aspects of writing about parts of speech, especially in our lesson about writing simple sentences. So to start with, we were going to have an overview of what we're going to do today. So for parts of speech, the first thing that we need to understand is the principles of parts of speech and how to identify them. The second is about nouns and pronouns, usually in the position of subject and object, and pronouns as noun replacer. The third is about verbs, an understanding of verbs as main verbs in a sentence, and other parts of speech, and the kinds of verbs, such as action verbs and linking verbs. So let us know about the principles about parts of speech. So to start with, we should understand parts of speech as elements of a sentence. We need to know the concept of parts of speech to identify the parts of sentence. To identify the parts of speech, usually we look at the context. The word must be identified in context, either in speech or in a sentence. For example, the word round. Now, the word round can be identified as a verb, just as in this case, the craftsman round the pottery before burning it. Now, round here is something that the craftsman is doing, as you can see in the picture here. He is shaping the pottery into a round object. So, round here is something that the craftsmen do. It is a verb. However, in a different sentence, such as this one, her round face was very peaceful. The word round here actually explains about the face. What kind of face is it? It is a round face, as you see in the picture here. So in this case, the word round is an adjective. So different position gives you a different parts of speech. Also, as a last example, the word round can also be used to describe boxing. The tireless boxers fought for 12 rounds. Rounds here is a part of a boxing match and it is considered as a noun. Now let us understand first what are nouns. Nouns are usually names of things. These are names for concrete objects or physical objects. Examples are names of persons, animals, plants, places, things, and substances or elements. Examples are those written here. The baby. Baby is the noun. Cats, Nelson Mandela. Now, names of people such as Nelson Mandela are nouns. Also, titles such as the Queen of England and professions, or name of jobs such as carpenter, and also names of places like Lake Tahoe. So all of these two words are nouns because they're part of a name. Also the name of elements or substances like plutonium. The second types of nouns are abstract nouns, things that cannot be seen or touched. Now this includes a feeling, a state of mind, a quality, an idea, an occasion, or a particular time. Examples are happiness, confusion, carefulness, Thanksgiving, and winter. These are all either occasion or a particular time, or a concept or a feeling. Now, how to identify these nouns? The first thing we can do is to put the word the directly in front of the word and it makes sense. Therefore, it is a noun. Let's look at one example here. Vile mafia gangsters from Philadelphia. Now, you could put the word the in front of it and it doesn't change the meaning. And this is actually because this is a noun phrase. The vile mafia gangsters from Philadelphia is a noun phrase. Now the second way to identify nouns is using the noun indicator or articles. These are a, the, and the plural ses. Now you see the word gangsters there has an s at the end of it. We would know that this word is a noun. Also the word the here is one of the articles. For example here, the word clarity, an international harvester traveleth. Now, clarity is something that you cannot really touch, and you would know from the meaning that it is a noun. And about international harvester traveler, you might not know what that is. And usually when you guess things that you don't really know, you could put just an article in front of it and it will be a noun. Now you would be correct because International Harvester Traveler is a brand of a car that you see over here, a nice small pickup. Now the third way to identify nouns is to look at the suffix or the endings of those words. Usually words that ends with ness, ity, or in are usually nouns. For example, indemnity, administration, and carefulness. So you know just by looking at this last part of the word that they are nouns. Now we will continue with pronouns, which are usually used to replace nouns. In this case, pronouns can be used to identify subjects, and as you know, subjects are usually nouns. The subject of a sentence, whether it is a single word noun or a long, complicated, complete subject as a noun phrase, can always be identified by replacing it with a subject pronoun he, she, it, or they. Now, for example, we have this sentence over here. The defendant's lawyers delayed the trial for 2 weeks. Now, you may be confused with which one of these long sentences or long parts of this sentence is actually the subject. In this case, we would know that the action here is about delaying the trial. We would know that this is the verb because the ending of ed is usually for verb 2 and the meaning that it delays something. Now, we would want to know who or what delay this one. In this case, we can guess that this is probably the subject of it, and you would be correct. And you would know that this can be replaced by the word he, because this is the person. So what if we put it on the context here? He delayed the trial for 2 weeks. Now this still makes sense. We would know that all of these words are actually the subject because it can be replaced by the pronoun he that shows the person. For the second example, it may be a bit longer. Finding out how much the payments make us reconsider buying a new car. Now this sounds like a really long sentence, and it is. And it is a bit hard because unlike this one, lawyers, for example, if you know the meaning, you know that this is a person, but this is more abstract. This is an abstract subject. However, you would know that this make here is a verb and a verb 1. Therefore, it must be the main verb of this sentence. Anything before that will probably be the subject. Now, in this case, finding out how much the payments can actually be replaced with the pronoun it, as it is something. Something that make us reconsider buying a new car. So in this case, if you want to figure out which ones are the subjects of the verb, try to replace especially the first parts of the sentence, and if you can replace those parts with a pronoun and they are behind a verb, it is probably a subject. Now let us continue with verbs. Verbs are in a certain position in a sentence, usually after the subjects. So there are 3 kinds of verbs. The first kind are the action verbs that shows action. These are the most common verbs. The examples are eat, kick, run, move, sing, play, etc. Example of this verb in a sentence is the boy kicks the ball. The boy here is the subject and he does an action which is kicks. That's why we call it an action verb. And the ball here is something that the boy kicks. This is the object. Now another type of verbs are linking verbs. Linking verbs links with the subject, reflects the subject. Now this does not show action like action verbs. Example of linking verbs are the to be verbs is, am, are, was, and were. In this example, we will see the cat is beautiful. Now in this case, there is no action that is being done. What is beautiful is the cat. So this just explains the condition of the subject. Now if you have an object over here, there is no object over here because we are just talking about the subject, and beautiful is not a noun. As we know, objects have to be nouns. So if we know that the sentence over here has an object, we call them transitive sentence. And without objects like this, we call this intransitive sentence. However, linking verbs also have objects. For example, the cat sees itself. However, we know that the cat doesn't do anything to the object. The object here is still the same. This is itself is the cat. The pronoun here refers back to the subject. We do not call this actually an object because these are the same things. Now the last type of the verbs that we're going to discuss here are helping verbs. Now helping verbs here cannot stand by itself, and it includes linking verbs. Example are can, could, shall, will, must, and also the to be if they are going to be used as a helping verb to another verb. Example of helping verbs is this: bakers can cook bread. Now in this case, bakers, the action is actually cooking. So what is the function of the can here? It shows the ability of bakers. In this case, can doesn't really have a meaning of its own because the focus is on this action verb, which is cook. Can here is considered a helping verb. Also, in this case, they are cooking bread. Now, in this case, are doesn't actually mean anything because the focus here is the action of cooking. In this case, the word are here is a helping verb that shows you the tenses, which is continuous, while the can here is actually what we call modals that shows, in this case, the ability. So is, am, are, or to be that shows tenses, and modals are usually called helping verbs. Now let us talk about action verbs in a closer detail here. The subject typically performs the action of the verb. In the predicate, there usually is an object. So these are the requirements for action verbs. You could see here that the monkey is doing an action, which is eating the bananas. So ate here is an action verb. The monkey is a subject, ate is the verb, and the bananas are the object. Now in another example, Harry sang the rock anthem. Harry is doing an action, which is singing, and what he was singing is a rock anthem. So it is correct that there is usually an object. Harry is the subject, sang is a verb, and the rock anthem here is the object. Now how about this sentence, Harry sings? In this case, Harry is still doing the action, which is singing. However, because this is a simple present, you would know that Harry here sings as a habit or something that he does for fun. In this case, there is no object. And is it still correct? Well, this is still correct. Also, if you add some more information about the singing, for example, Harry sang loudly like that, this is not considered an object because this gives more information about the singing. This is not a noun. Harry is the subject, sang is the verb, and loudly is just an adverb describing how Harry sings. And loudly is a verb that explains the way Harry sang. So in this case, the verb is not an action verb. We call this the linking verb because who is being loud, who is singing loudly, is Harry itself. So this referred back, or what we say before, reflects back to the subject. Now let's us talk about linking verbs then. The subject typically does not perform an action. There is no action to perform. Instead, the subject is the topic of the sentence, and the predicate gives information about the subject. The journey was terrible and dangerous. Now, what is terrible and dangerous is the journey. The journey is the subject, was the verb, or in this case a linking verb, and this is not an object. These are adjectives that defines or give more information about the journey, which is a noun. That's why we call them adjective. We can also call the verb here, the linking verb here, as being verb because it is a form of a to be. Now the second example is that the food tastes good. In this case, what is good? The food. So this is not an object, this is just a condition of the subject. The subject is the food, taste is the verb, and good is the same as an adjective. In this case, it does not use a to be, but still, because the good here, this part of the sentence, reflects back to the subject, explain the condition of the subject, we call this a linking verb. Now the last sentence perhaps is a bit more different. Christina became a murderer. The last part here is actually a noun. However, we still call this a linking verb. Can this be an object? Not really, because this is the murderer here is actually Christina. Christina is the subject, became is the verb, and the object here is not really the object because this is the same person as the subject, Christina. If we want to use another word for the verb there, if we want to change it, we can change it into this way. Christina is a murderer. This is also the same because the murderer is Christina and Christina is the murderer. This is not exactly an object, and this is still a linking verb, in this case a to be verb. Now let us move on to the last part about verbs, the last kind of verbs, which are helping verbs. Now certain helping verbs function only as helpers, in this case words or verbs such as will, shall, should, or could. Now you have to use this with other verbs that actually describes the action. However, some helping verbs can also be used alone as main verbs such as has, have, had to show ownership, or the to be's is, am, are, was, were. And this can also be used helping verbs to show tenses mainly. For example, in this sentence here, he must finish the job. Now the word must here is the helping verb for this main verb. So they cannot be separated, because if you, for example, remove the word finish, he must the job, you don't get the meaning out of it. And the word must here actually adds to the meaning of this word finish in that it is obligatory, or they have to finish the job. In this case, the word must here is the helping verb, finish would be the main verb, and must here is part of what we call modals. The second example, the old man has a good job. In this case, has is alone. The old man is the subject, this is the main verb, and a good job is the object. Has here is the main verb, and it is not called a helping verb. However, in this case, in this other example, the old man has had a good job. Has here in the second example has become a helping verb because this is part of a tense. So in this case, subject is the old man, as in the same. Has here in this sentence, yes, it has become a main verb as proof of ownership, showing ownership, while has here is just a helping verb, and this will be the main verb. The tense here is simple present, and the tense here is present perfect. So has as a helping verb here is here because it is a helping verb to show the tense for present perfect. If you remember your lessons about tenses, perfect tenses always require has or have in front of the main verb. In this case, has here, although you might think that these are doubles, has in the verb 1 form is there because it is a helping verb for a present perfect tense. Had is the main verb, therefore it has to be changed to verb 3, just like the rules for present perfect. Now we come across a bit of a problem that most people would think about as verb ing acting as nouns. Now what we talked about in the previous parts is that verbs are verbs, nouns are nouns. However, we talk about here the special form of a verb ing that actually can act like a noun. Some helping form of verbs can be used as nouns, in this case functioning as a subjects or objects, the verb ing. Why they do this? Because they are the name of activities. As we know, names are usually nouns, such as the activity of swimming, the activity of jogging, the activity of running, when we use them as a subject, as in this sentence. Jogging is a good exercise. In this case, the verb ing is the name of the activity. This is to describe an activity. This is not doing anything. Jogging, the name of the activity, is a good exercise. Jogging is the subject, is the verb, and this is that activity is a good exercise. If we want to replace the subject as using the pronoun that, that activity is a good exercise. Now this is also to check whether this is actually a verb or a verb ing acting as a noun. Another example is doing exercises is good. Doing exercise here is the subject. The name of the activity that we consider good is exercises. Now the name of the subject matter that we are talking about here is what we call a gerund. Now this is just an introduction, just so that you don't get confused when you see a verb ing acting as a subject as name of activities. We call this gerund. Now to summarize what we have talked about today, we talked about that the context and position of a word and phrase in a sentence can determine the part of speech, whether it's a noun or a verb or everything else. And nouns and pronouns are names and things. Pronouns are replacers for nouns, and nouns can be identified by using articles, pronouns, and suffixes such as ness or ity that we talked about earlier. And verbs are usually categorized into action verbs, linking verbs, and helping verbs, and they are mostly defined action. These are the action verbs. They are most common that you find in a sentence, and it's usually put after the subject. Now we can talk more about the parts of speech that we only touch on briefly here, especially on adjectives that gives more info on nouns, adverbs that give more info on verbs, adjectives, and other parts of speech, and also verbs and adjectives that sometimes can be confusing, such as in this case, the speeding car. Speeding here explained what kind of car, while honking here is part of a verb. So we need to know which ones of these are verbs and adjectives. So to know about this, please watch our next videos on adjectives and adverbs. And for now, this is all from me. I will see you next time.